I'm not gonna lie, I was not expecting to make a video about this since it had a theatrical release. Then I remembered it could also be rented digitally. And now we're here. Readers, if you've been a long-time subscriber to the channel, or if you decide to do some deep diving into the channel's videos of yesteryear, then you know that the Saw franchise is kinda a guilty pleasure of mine. Out of the original 7 movies, the last good one in my opinion was part 4, and I pretty much only stuck around to see how the yearly installments they kept releasing in response to the narrative it kept revealing about itself was going to end. Meanwhile, the 8th film, Jigsaw, was an okay, but unnecessary installment continuation of the series that alluded to the idea that there was at least one last disciple of John Kramer out there. So when I found out that Spiral from the Book of Saw was going to be a pseudo-sequel slash spin-off to the 8th film John Kramer saga, for lack of better words, instead of just, Saw 9, I was interested in seeing where they were going to take it. Especially after I learned that Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson were going to be the faces of this fresh new take on the franchise that, because let's just face it, it's the one thing about these movies that's always going to make its way there, will bring just enough closure to leave itself open for new installments. And from the look of the trailer, it definitely piqued my interest. Then I watched it. And I'm gonna be honest with you, readers, I didn't know exactly how to feel. So, before I continue, let's just get one thing straight. In case you got the wrong impression from the last statement I just made, the story in Spiral is good, and Chris Rock gives a great performance in it as the main character, Ezekiel Banks. Because of his comedic background, he actually pulls off the lone wolf cop that's been jaded from being on the force for such a long time very well. Especially if you compare Zeke to Detective Butters in Lethal Weapon 4, the first cop role I've ever seen him in. And because he and his past were the focus of the Jigsaw copycat instead of how the previous movies played out their narratives, the overall story played more like it was in the subgenre of slasher horror instead of the splatter horror the other ones were in, despite still using techniques usually established with it. It definitely gave off 7 vibes, but it was a bit more simplistic than 7. If you really pay attention to the clues and are familiar with certain story beats and tropes in slashers and horror stories involving a serial killer, you can pretty much figure out who the Jigsaw copycat is near the end of the movie's second act. But Banks' journey in finding out who it is, what their motive is, and why they're doing it in the first place is its own reward when it comes to unraveling the mystery. So if it's not how the film handles the aspect of unmasking the Jigsaw copycat or the performances by Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson that's the problem that I have with the film, then what is, you may be asking? Well, it's how it handles the topic regarding the focal point of the very movie. And the focal point is the current state of corrupt law enforcement. So, before I continue, here is your obligatory spoiler warning for Spiral. If you plan on going to watch it in either theaters or rent it and don't want it to be spoiled for you, wait until you properly do so before you continue on in this video if you care. Cool? Cool. Now the reason why I said what I said is because one of the things we find out about Zeke Banks' background is that he took down a dirty cop who murdered a witness to one of said cops' crimes and tried to play it off like
he pulled a gun on me. The witness pulled a gun on me?
As you can tell from that clip, Zeke found it pretty hard to believe. And as you could imagine, when Zeke put said cop away, because of course he did, It caused at least 80% of the other cops in the precinct, most of said cops, it's revealed later on in the movie, are just as corrupt as the one he put away, to frown upon him and lose their respect. Despite being the son of the previous and well-respected retired chief of police, Marcus Banks, played by Samuel L. Jackson, who, it's revealed that, thanks to a law that was passed back then called Article 8, gave cops their own discretion to handle crime as they saw fit, which caused damn near every single cop, with the exception of Banks, in that precinct to utilize that article to their advantage in order to protect themselves from the likes of participating in illegal activity, committing first-degree murder, and lying under oath in order to put innocent people behind bars. And most importantly, it allows those in charge of the precinct, Angie Garza and Zeke's own father, to protect them. Which is why, alongside the latter two individuals, that the Jigsaw copycat, who it's revealed to be Zeke's newly assigned partner Bill Emerson, targets every corrupt police officer in Zeke's district and puts him front and center, hoping that by the end of everything, Zeke can see what he's trying to do regarding ridding the city of corrupt police officers, considering what he was willing to do in the past, and decide to join him in his crusade. Now, as you can imagine, part of the reason why I personally felt off about the decisions made in regards to choosing corruption within the police force as the angle for Spiral is due to how close to home it is for a lot of people in real life in the United States over the past, 9 or so years. So many innocent people, especially people of color, have died because of the combination of police brutality and systemic racism established throughout this nation, and left both law enforcement and the judicial system in such a state that it cannot even be trusted by the people it's supposed to protect to correctly do its job. So when I see a character in Spiral like Zeke, a cop that has grown so jaded regarding the people he works with because he doesn't know who he can trust to either have his back or to uphold the law morally and without prejudice, I'm forced to see all of those Facebook and Twitter videos, all those TikToks, and read all those articles that highlight the cops that are actually dedicated to upholding the law properly, but are constantly berated with losing the respect of their fellow officers and chiefs to the point of losing their jobs and being blacklisted due to refusing to comply with corruption because
loyalty.
The conflict here, however, is that this movie was conceived too early for it to have been immediately inspired by the ridiculous wave of police brutality that re-sparked the Black Lives Matter movement in the year 2020. Before the current health and safety crisis hit and caused it to shift to its 2021 release, the movie was originally scheduled to be released on May 15th, 2020. George Floyd was killed by ex-Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin 10 days later. And as 2020 went on, rolling into 2021, we've seen wave after wave of multiple innocent people of color falling victim to police brutality and corruption, only for the ones responsible to be constantly protected due to the combination of that same loyalty mentioned in Spiral and the systemic racism that enforces it to remain unchallenged. So even though Spiral was conceived and created in a time before the current apex regarding the fight against police brutality, it's very hard for me, and I'm sure some of you as a result, to not look at the characters and the scenario the movie supplies and find the decisions it made with them both uncomfortable and disappointing. Outside of Chris Rock wanting to be the main character, considering he was an executive producer and helped write the treatment for the film, Zeke being a black man is reminiscent of all of those videos and articles of unprejudiced cops that truly want to protect and serve, as I stated earlier. But it's hard for me to keep that in mind when I, as a black man that has been affected by the likes of racial profiling by law enforcement before, gets pulled over now in this day and age, and hope that that's one of the ones that I get. And while it is, in fact, possible for there to be a person of color that was in Samuel L. Jackson's position in regards to protecting the corrupt cops within his precinct, trust me, we're currently dealing with one in Detroit, so I know it's possible anywhere else. It was still hard for me to look at Jackson's character once the copycat revealed what he did to Zeke and not think to myself, how could you, as a black man, allow yourself to step in the way of these people, knowing good and damn well that your possession of power won't make you exempt? Readers, Spiral isn't a case of a bad movie with ill intentions. What Spiral is a decent movie within the Saw universe that unfortunately came out too soon. Because Spiral was released in the midst of the current movement of combating systemic racism and police brutality, the respectability politics it represents unintentionally deflect the importance of it in ways that some of us who may not know better either just can't currently gel with or can't help but take out of context, considering everything. And I say that as an individual who knows that the production process of a motion picture takes more time than some may realize in order to get from a greenlit pitch to a theatrical release, yet still felt that the very nature of Spiral's narrative and the character choices were making light of the current fight we're dealing with in real life. So, if you are in fact a Saw fan, but you feel like you might be the same way when you watch Spiral, I suggest that you get in a proper headspace in order to do so. And if that's not currently possible for you, then I simply suggest that you hold off on watching it until you are. So with that being said, readers, your homework assignment for the day. Write in the comment section below what you thought of Spiral from the Book of Saw if you've seen it. Or if you feel like sharing with the rest of the class a film you watched that coincidentally touched on a subject that was a bit sore for you that you had a hard time disassociating it from because of its commentary. Whichever question you decide to answer, I'd love to know your thoughts. If you want to help financially support the channel, you can join my Patreon by clicking the card at the end of the video or in the link in the description down below, where you can also find a link to my merchandise store. Or if you prefer to give a one-time donation, you can find links to my PayPal and my Ko-fi account in the description box as well. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because I post new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and every other Friday. But until then, this is Readus 101. Class dismissed.